So today we are starting a brand new series on the channel, breaking down each weapon in the finals, going through all the key stats you need to know, going over the recoil patterns and how to counter that recoil, as well as touching on all the pros and cons of the weapon to give you guys the most comprehensive breakdown you can find. And today we're going to be starting off with the AKM for the medium class. Now all of these stats have been double checked by myself in the practice range, but the initial values have come from a public spreadsheet made by Valkyrie AIM, where you can see all the stats for each weapon, so be sure to check out the link in the description. Big thank you to Valkyrie AIM for all of those values, but without wasting any time, let's get stuck right into it. Now the reason I've started off with the AKM is that it is essentially just my favorite weapon in the game. It is a jack of all trades. It is the first weapon unlocked for the medium class, and so it is probably one of the most used weapons for a lot of players, at least early on anyway. It does everything pretty well. It's got solid accuracy, therefore some decent range on it. It can also do pretty well up close with a high rate of fire and relatively tight hip fire, and the higher magazine size is also a plus for the medium class too, since most other weapons in that class are definitely on the lower side in terms of the size of those magazines. Now getting into the stats of the weapons, I've gone through and just kind of picked the ones that I think are the most important to be shown off, starting off with the damage as well as the headshot damage. The AKM deals 20 damage per shot to the body and 30 damage per shot to the head. Like I mentioned, it does have a relatively higher magazine size compared to the other weapons in this class, coming in at 36 bullets per magazine. It has a fire rate, or an RPM, rounds per minute, of 600, and in terms of the reload time, it takes 2.6 seconds to reload this weapon. Now when it comes to the shots to kill, this is for both the body and headshots. We've got them separated here for each class because obviously it is different depending on the class that you're shooting at. For the light class, it will take 8 shots to the body to kill an enemy, or 5 shots to the head, versus a medium, it will be 13 shots to the body and 9 shots to the head to get a kill, or if you're fighting against a heavy, it'll be 18 shots to the body or 12 shots to the head to get that kill. As for the time to kill, once again against every different class in the game, keep in mind the time to kill is just average. This is all based on the body shots, and this is essentially if you're going to hit every shot. So the time to kill is obviously going to be a bit longer than this because you're not going to hit every single shot every time you're shooting at someone. For the light class, the time to kill is 0.7 seconds. For the medium class, it is 1.2 seconds, and for the heavy class, it will be an average of 1.7 seconds for that time to kill. Again, for all of those, keep in mind it will generally be a fair bit longer than that, simply because you're going to miss shots and stuff like that. Now that's it for the core stats. We're going to move on now to the recoil pattern of the AKM, both the ADS recoil as well as the recoil pattern when you are actually hip firing. Now, as you can see both on screen right here, when it comes to the ADS recoil, it sort of forms a bit of a question mark shape. It'll go up and to the right quickly, but then it does kind of slow down and go back to the left after that, forming that sort of question mark shape. And then for the hip fire recoil, this is actually pretty accurate compared to what you would think for an assault rifle. It does go slightly up and to the right as well, but it does end up kind of just spraying fairly centrally by the end of the magazine, and so the overall pattern is kind of just vertical and an overall even spread. Now if you guys are enjoying the video so far and you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. There is going to be plenty more content like this coming for the finals, so make sure you don't miss out. Now moving on to both the strengths and the weaknesses for the AKM, starting off with the strengths. Probably its biggest strength is, like I've touched on before, its magazine size, especially compared to the FCAR. For me, that is pretty much the only thing that the AKM objectively does better than the FCAR, because I will be honest, that gun, even though it's not necessarily my favorite over the AKM, I do have to say it is probably the better option. Now the extra magazine size can be very clutch, especially when it comes to fighting heavies, for example. With an FCAR, it'll take roughly 75% of your magazine if you hit every single shot to actually kill an enemy, and that means if you miss 5 shots with the FCAR, you are not going to be able to get a kill against a heavy without having to reload. So using the FCAR does mean you do need to be a little bit more accurate, but it obviously deals a little bit more damage and stuff like that as well. And against the light and medium classes, it is absolutely dominant, whereas that high magazine size of the AKM, it is just a little bit more forgiving. It obviously still works very well against light and medium classes as well, but when it comes to the heavy class, or even just if you're fighting 2 lights, for example, and you can kill one and sort of spray transfer to the other one, it is just very handy to have that extra magazine size. And so that for me is probably this gun's biggest strength. The recoil is also very simple and easy to control. It's a very, I guess, entry-level weapon, hence why it is the first weapon unlocked. So it is overall just a pretty easy weapon to use, which is also a very big strength considering not everyone is going to be a pro when it comes to playing this game or any shooter. Now its final strength is also actually one of its weaknesses, but this is that it is the jack of all trades of any of the medium weapons. It does everything fairly well. It doesn't really have any like key weaknesses where it's just so much worse than all of the other weapons. It is generally just really decent at sort of every situation. Like I said, it does have some pretty good accuracy, so it's got decent range on it for an assault rifle. It is also pretty good up close as well, and that extra magazine size compared to the FCAR does help out a hell of a lot as well. Now, getting into the weaknesses, like I just touched on, even though the jack of all trades is kind of a strength, as the saying goes, jack of all trades, master of none. Now, it doesn't really do any single thing better than any weapon in the class. The FCAR is probably better at range. You've got the model 1887 that is probably better up close. Even the Magnum, for example, is kind of the same situation. It doesn't really do any specific thing better than any other weapon in the class, if that makes sense, outside of, like I said, the magazine size, and that's not necessarily just something that it does, that's just the case with this weapon. Now, another weakness is, even though I just actually said the recoil is very simple and easy to control, one downside of it is that the earlier section of its recoil is a little bit harder to control, even though the overall recoil is pretty easy, and this means that you will generally miss a lot of shots from close to the beginning of the magazine until maybe 10 or so shots have been fired, and that can make the beginning of gunfights a little bit tougher. So it kind of gives a lot of enemies the jump on you, in that they may hit a few more shots than you, and even though your weapon is then going to become a little bit more accurate like we saw with that recoil pattern, by that point they may have you nearly dead anyway. So the recoil overall is very solid, and I would actually put that as a strength like I did, but just the initial, say, 10 bullets of the magazine, it can definitely be a little bit harder to control, and that is definitely something I consider a weakness. Now, moving on to what this weapon is best paired with, we're going to go through both the team composition, as in when to use it in comparison to what your teammates are using, as well as what it's paired with well when it comes to the gadgets and specialization. In terms of the team composition, this is a great weapon to use when your teammates aren't using weapons with higher magazine sizes. So, for example, if both teammates are also playing the medium class, but they are maybe both using the FCAR or maybe the model 1887 or something like that, having those extra rounds in your AKM to fire downrange can definitely come in handy for a bit of added pressure on the enemies, especially when defending objectives, for example. Even though those other weapons are very solid, if you're not continuously sending damage downrange, a lot of times that can allow enemies to feel a little bit of comfort, I guess, whereas if you're playing a team of everyone using an LMG, for example, it feels like they're just constantly shooting at you, and that can kind of just give perceived pressure even if they're not actually hitting those shots. Because of that, it is definitely good to use this weapon when your teammates have any weapon with a lower magazine size, so be sure to keep that in mind. As for what it's best paired with when it comes to your gadgets and specializations, something that I love to pair with the higher magazine size is a gas or a pyro grenade to try and flush enemies out from the objective, at which point you've got plenty of ammo to send down range, and you can either take them out or at least deal enough damage to cause them to flee the area. I feel like gas combined with the AKM is a really, really solid combination, and that is generally something that I love to run with this weapon. Overall, the AKM is a really good weapon, and in my opinion, it is actually underrated because of the FCAR. I do think the FCAR is probably the better weapon due to the damage output, and if you are accurate with your shots, it is definitely the better weapon. But like I said, for my own playstyle, I actually do prefer the AKM, even though that is probably a little bit of a hot take. It is definitely one of the easier weapons in the game to use, in my opinion. It has a lower skill ceiling than the likes of a few others, but the overall learning curve is also much easier, and that makes it perfect for either new players or players who just aren't at that pro level. So that is it for the first weapon guide for the finals, guys. I'm keen to hear if there's anything you want to see improved in this series moving forward, so be sure to leave some feedback down below. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there in the arena.